They are recording so that they can show this later, so they told me that after I agreed. So I'll do my best, but y'all chime up if you have comments, questions, anything I can talk to you about. I work in elementary school. I'm a special education teacher at Chattahoochee Elementary School. I work with Marilyn Gates, and we do our Good News Club there, and Michelle here, and a couple of others. So I'm excited to be here. I teach students with autism, but have a wealth of experience with other disabilities as well. So here to talk about how that might look in club and some things that we might can do. I've kind of got everything written up. I told them I was nervous enough about speaking in front of everybody. I was afraid I would get here with my laptop and things wouldn't work. So we're just going old school paper copies, and that's how we're going to do it. So first of all, just by being in Good News Club, you're answering a calling. You've already been called to minister to children, and we have a huge responsibility. And what we do and say has life-altering applications to our kids. Hello, friends. Welcome. So I just wanted to start with a couple of Bible verses here. Luke 18:15-7. Now they're bringing infants to him. Y'all heard this many, many times before. That he might touch them. And when the disciples saw it, they rebuked him. But Jesus called to them, saying, "Let the children come to me, and do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of heaven, kingdom of God." And I want to say that, you know, in today's times, there's more. I can pass them out. Y'all sit and I'll find you with them. We are facing a lot more challenges, I'd say, working with children than we have ever in the past. We find that in the school system. I'll get you. We find that in the school system. We find it in our clubs. But the needs of our children are varying greatly, a lot more than we've experienced in the past. Y'all come on in, and I'll find you. There's some targets in the middle here. Yes. And another verse, Hebrews 10:23-25. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering. For he who promised is faithful, and let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works. We're to encourage each other to do better, right? And not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. I think when we're in clubs, we're in schools, we see so many challenges sometimes. It's hard to look past some of those challenges and see the big picture, the important picture. What we're called to do is meet the needs of children, to show them Jesus. That's what we're there to do. We have to be careful not to discourage children in the midst of times that might be travel for them. You know, it's a struggle for us sometimes, but our goal is to help these children and not to stand in the way of them learning. So the needs of our children vary greatly. Special needs are just different needs. You and I have very different needs. Like, I might be a great learner when it comes to seeing things and figuring out how things work, but to read a manual to figure out how to do something might not be my thing. So we all have different strengths. You might be a great singer. I might not be. You might be a great dancer. Not me. I might play great football. Maybe not you. So we have to learn to play to each other's strengths, and that's something we need to do in club. So some of the disabilities that I wrote here are differing abilities. ADHD, you're going to see a lot of that in the classroom. The numbers are increasing greatly. I think the latest said 6 to 16% of children have a form of ADHD or ADD. And that is a huge impact on the way children learn, the way they can participate, not just in school, but in clubs, in church. You know, I'm sure you probably see that where you worship too. Kids have a harder time sitting still. They need to fidget. They need to move. And it's not because they're not disciplined. Yeah, that's not always the case. I think in the past we have thought that, you know, if a kid can't sit, then something's not working right. Somebody's not doing what they're supposed to do to make sure this child can sit. That's not always the case. These children may not have the ability to do that. So we have to work around that and find out a way to minister them. Another one is autism, autism spectrum disorder. It's a huge spectrum. 1 in 44 children now have autism. And that can range from a high-functioning child who can, read, write, label all the planets, maybe smarter than me academically, but may have very challenging social skills, may seem disrespectful because they don't understand those social boundaries. They may talk to you like maybe they're your peer, and you're thinking, that's kind of out of your realm. You shouldn't be talking like that. They don't understand that that's not the way they're supposed to talk. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have children that have very challenged learning needs, have difficulty with functioning skills, just the basic life skills. So when you hear somebody say they have autism, it could mean anything. So much variation there with that disability. You have kids with learning disabilities, kids with intellectual disabilities, visual impairments. I don't know if some of you noticed, some of you got the big copy of the notes and some of you got the little copy of the notes. So just something, she got the small one. See, you might have to trade up because some kids might need something a little different than another kid. So we have to be sure to be flexible within our clubs. Hearing impairments. And some of this may not quite be identified with our students. Most of the time it has by the time they get to a club. They've been in school for a little bit and teachers have been able to figure out that something's not quite right and they've had some testing done. And then there are other health impairments, and you'll see this is like in the school system, all these acronyms. I mean, we could go on and on with the acronyms within the school system, but we have what we call OHI, which is other health impairment. And these are like chronic physical ailments that impact our children. And these are things you might not see right off either. So there are things like heart conditions, asthma, which is huge in our population right now. Those are things we have to be aware of. ADHD, Tourette syndrome, sickle cell anemia, all these things that we might not see, but impact our children and maybe impact them in ways we don't understand. So I think it's important when we're meeting our kids, to be open and have those conversations about who they are, be open to asking parents questions if you see something that you might be wondering about. I think that's important. And then we have allergies. Allergies have increased dramatically since I was in school. Right now, up to 40% of people have an environmental allergy, 8% of children have a food allergy, and 5% of people have like an insect allergy. So like bee stings, peanut allergies, and then other food intolerances like sugar, gluten, dairy. So those are all things, especially if we're serving snack at club, all things that we kind of have to be aware of when we're leading our club. So how many of you have seen ADHD in your club, you think? Anybody had any children that were diagnosed with autism? Okay. How about food allergies? Yes. Mm-hmm. See, it's very prevalent right now. And I remember when I was in school, this was just not something we knew about. When we were doing clubs when I was younger, we were just kids. We didn't know everybody had all these different issues and they just weren't coming to light, I guess, at that point. But now we just really have to be aware. So think about some of these things. Do you ever listen to music while you work? Raise your hand if you listen to music while you work. You can work that way. Can anybody watch TV while they're typing a letter or something? Yeah, we multitask. Any of you zone out when information is like over your head? Yes. Have trouble hearing or seeing? See? Anybody talk to themselves?
Between the argument problems.
That's right. What about, do you ever walk into a store or restaurant and find the music too loud? The lights too bright? You're going to find in this room we've got a blinking light back there that would probably drive some people bananas. Yes. Are any of you impulsive? Do you ever make a rash decision? You're like, oh, I should have taken a day to think about that. Yes. All these things are things you're going to see with our kids. But as adults, we have learned how to manage those weaknesses, those things that kind of could get in our way. Our kids haven't had time to do that yet. And they're facing a lot more struggle internally than what we ever did. So think about yourself in some of those areas where you might have some of those little quirks, and give a little bit more grace to our kids, because they need it. They really do. So some of the things you might see in club, and you can add to these because I'm sure you've got a list longer than mine. Fidgeting. Everybody's got fidgeters, right? Yep, fidgeters. Avoidance. Do you have kids that just avoid being part of anything in your club? Yes. Constant talking. Yes. Yes. Wandering. Have you had a wanderer? Yep. Talking back. Seeming disrespectful. That's one thing we find in the, because I teach special education, we work on with children and work on writing goals to help, make them better students, help them be more successful in life. And disrespectful is one word we can't really use, because tell me if you can define disrespectful. So if you want to teach a child how to be respectful, they need to know what that is. And a lot of kids don't. They might not know. So you really have to be able to define what that is. You can't just say, you're being disrespectful. You can say, hey, you're talking right now, but really everybody's trying to listen to me and they're having a hard time listening because they're hearing you talk. So give them real life examples about what that might be. You're raising your voice to me right now, and that's making me uncomfortable. So if you could just bring your voice down, we can have a conversation. So giving them real cues, real definitions about what makes disrespect, because a lot of kids don't know that. And like, I couldn't define that if I wrote it out, but I can tell specific examples that make me feel like that behavior is disrespectful. So we're having to change a lot of our terminology too. And by being more specific, you can help your kids, because they can learn to maybe fix one thing at a time. Disrespectful could encompass so many things, so many different things, but they can fix one thing at a time if you really work on it. All right, so the next part, what they might be thinking or feeling. Okay, so if you have a kid that's fidgeting, think about our kids with ADHD, ADD. Their bodies can't be still. So fidgeting is something they're going to do, moving around. If you sit in a meeting and you rock your foot back and forth, or you tap your foot, you're a fidgeter too. They haven't figured out that way that everybody can't see yet to fidget. So I think it's okay to let them fidget, but maybe we need to find a better way for them to fidget that doesn't impact everybody else's learning. So they're probably feeling stir crazy. They feel like they need to move. So their body is telling them, I can't do this. So give them a way to do that. We've used too, have you ever used the stretch bands for exercising? We've used those on the chairs. I don't know how y'all do your clubs, but if you're in a chair, you can put one of those around the leg of a chair, and the kid can kick the band and move, bounce their feet on it. So that's a good way if their legs are busy. But you can also give them something to hold. I wouldn't do a fidget spinner necessarily. That can be a little distracting. But something they can hold in their palm of the hand. Even a paper clip. I mean, you can just sit and move a paper clip and just stay busy. And sometimes it's just the random things that might get them going. You can do just a ball. Not something they're going to throw. You don't want something hard, because you will have the kids that will launch it across the room. But if it's just like a pom-pom or something that they can feel and they can rub. I've seen where they take paper clips and put beads on them, or do a little string with beads and they can move, or a pipe cleaner. And you can use the colors and put the beads on, like the wordless book. And so you're also tying in part of a lesson with that too. So there are lots of ways we can make fidgets. I could talk about fidgets for a long time, and maybe we'll come back to that. But other things. So kids that are avoiding the lesson or avoiding you, sometimes it's just too hard. You have kids that may have limited understanding of the Bible. We have children that have limited understanding of the English language in our clubs. It's not a disability, but it does impact their ability to access what we're presenting to them. So we have to be able to present things on a smaller scale to them, maybe giving them key words to tie in. They may not all get the whole lesson when they come to us, but if they can get something out of that lesson, mostly they need to get that we love them and Jesus loves them. If we can have them leave the club every day knowing that, then we've done a great job. And that's setting a basis for them to learn and want to know more. So if you have a kid that can't stop talking, you know, they may not be able to stop. I mean, they're just so impulsive. We talked about it. We're impulsive sometimes. Have you ever had a thought in your head and you interrupt somebody because you know you're going to forget it? You don't just get it out there. Yes, we have kids like that too. They feel like they need to be heard. Somebody in our last session talked about giving the kids whiteboards, and I thought it was a great idea. Whiteboards and markers or papers and pencils so that they have an idea, they can write it down without forgetting it, and they can show it to you without speaking it during the middle of a lesson. So that's something you can do to help them out. For your kids that wander, sometimes, a lot of times our kids with autism may wander. So just giving them a sense of boundary, like letting them know this is your space and I need you to stay in this space. And if it's maybe, if you have tables, maybe put them not on the outside fringe of a table, because that gives them more access to wander. So if I'm sitting right here, I can wander all over this room. But if you put me right there, it's going to take a lot for me to get out and wander. And a lot of people are going to see me before I get there. So that's just something to think about when you're setting up your environment. Think about those kids and what might be a better space for them to be in. And we talked a little bit about kids that are talking about back or being disrespectful, what we think is disrespectful. Some of them just think, I just answered the question. You probably hear them say that. I just answered the question. I'm not being disrespectful. I just answered the question. In their mind, that's true. So we can just give them cues as to, you know, this might be a better way to present that because that's how I felt. This is how you made me feel. You still have some that it'll take a while before they get that, but it's worth a try. And then we have sleepers. Do you have sleepers? Yes. Sometimes, honestly, it's because they're exhausted. I'm exhausted at the end of the school day. Kids are exhausted. They've worked hard. They've played hard. And then we feed them a snack. Nap time. They're ready for nap time. But sometimes it's because they're tired. Sometimes it's because they're bored. And sometimes they don't understand. They're overwhelmed. So when we don't understand when we're overwhelmed, sometimes we have a tendency to kind of shut down. Sometimes that's what our kids are going to do too. So I think it's important, like we do in club, to keep things moving, to mix up activities. So you're going to do a Bible verse, and then Ms. Michelle's great about doing an activity, making us do the motions, mixing a song up between quiet times so that kids are up and moving and keeping them going. And then there's some kids, we've had some kindergartners that have come in because they have older siblings, and bless their hearts, they just can't. So sometimes we just have to let it go. Sometimes we just let them take a nap. Wake them up, make sure they know Jesus loves them, we love them.
Jesus took it out.
That's right. Jesus rested. Absolutely. Yeah. We all need to rest, right? We prefer that it's not in club all the time. But you know, especially in August and September, you may need to build up some of that, you know. First of the club, they might not be able to stay awake the whole time, but hopefully they'll build up to that. So this quote I have here, I love it. Fair isn't everybody getting the same thing. Fair is everybody getting what they need in order to be successful. So you're going to have to do things differently for different kids. And you have to kind of, I hope you can step away from the thought that, well, I'm not doing it for that kid, so I can't do it for this kid. Well, that kid might not need it. That kid might not need for you to sit beside them, you know, and point out the scripture for them. They might not need for you to give them an extra little fidget to hold during the lesson. But you have to look at what is going to make your child successful. What's going to allow them to learn with you during club. If it's holding a paper clip, let them hold a paper clip. If I gave you a little coloring sheet, these are things that go along with our lessons. There's a Bible verse. If you have kids that are so fidgety and distracted, give them a Bible verse to hold in front of them. They can be writing down on here during the lesson. You can give them a coloring sheet. Some of them can be coloring. I know it's a little bit of a hassle to have to collect crayons at the end. But hey, if they can color and listen, I have kids that can be singing a song, looking the other direction while I'm giving a lesson. I ask them a question. So don't automatically think that because they're doing something else that they're not listening or they're not getting it. But this might be the way you get to them, you know? And then one little girl last year, one of our little girls that didn't have a lot of English, she would get restless and she needed something to do. So Marilyn always prints us up an agenda, so I started giving her my agenda. And she would watch because she would know when one thing was done, she'd cross it off. So she may not have been understanding everything, but she was learning, and she would start to key these words with different activities that we were doing too. And if she had a question, she'd look to me to say, you know, are we done? What? Yeah. Or wait just a minute, not quite yet. So that's another simple idea. And you don't have to waste a whole sheet of paper. Print more on the page and save some paper, because we're always trying to save our paper at school. Save our paper and our printing. It's not cheap, you know. So some things that you can do. We've talked about a few things, but providing lessons in short segments with frequent breaks in between. Just like we talked about, do a lesson. Ms. Marilyn's good about having the kids stand up after a minute, or you know, turn around, or everybody just get their wiggles out and then sit back down and continue a lesson. And it's okay if things don't go the way you planned them. That's just the way it is. You might only get through half a lesson one day, and you're just gonna have to let that be okay. You know, if it's more important for you to meet the needs of these kids right now and they get the best part of the lesson, that's okay. So if you get through the first half and everybody's wiggly, stop where you're at. Stop where you're at, have them stand up, do a jumping jack, touch their toes, spin around, be silly. Then say, okay, ready, sit back down. And then they're ready to go again. So you have to be able to be flexible. Flexible is a good word. Flexibility is really important. Another thing is let them participate. Some of your kids, especially with our friends with attention difficulties, need to participate. So it could be through coloring or writing. Maybe they need a job to do. We've had kids that forward our slides on our computer, and they're tied in because they're watching for the cue for when to change the slide. We've had kids pass out pencils, pass out snacks, be responsible for picking up name tags. Anybody have any other jobs that your kids might do during club that could help out? We have kids read the Bible. Throw away trash, yes. And in part of lesson, Marilyn's good too about giving out Bibles with verses printed. And so during the lesson, she'll say, okay, read this Bible verse. And she'll point to the kid that has the Bible verse. Now, one thing I want you to be cautious of is, like we said, some kids do have learning disabilities. There are some kids that are going to have really poor reading skills. So maybe before you have them read the scripture verse, kind of have them read it to you before they have to get up in front of anybody to see if maybe they're going to need some help. And if they do, they can still do it. Just have them read it with you. So get up and have it right beside them, and then you just read it with them. So they feel like they're participating still. They just need that little accommodation. Provide them individual attention. So one of your kids with autism might need somebody to kind of sit beside them and kind of regulate them. But then as you're able to do that for a little while, you might be able to find a peer that is really good to be able to sit with that student and kind of keep them on track. And it doesn't have to be anything overt. Sometimes you can just walk up to a student or walk behind them and kind of tap their desk, you know, just to get their attention, to settle them in. They might need some visual cues. So we've had before like stickers that we have at the desk where you can just tap a picture where it says like, be quiet, or feet in front. I have my bag of tricks. So hands to self. If you need something simple that just has some pictures, you can just touch it without having to say a word to the student. And I've had these in the classroom with me when we've been in club, and I can just walk around and just say quiet. And they don't have to see. I can just sneak it in, and not everybody has to see what I'm doing because they don't want to be called out. And you can also, with some of your kids, maybe you've already talked to them a little bit about, you know, being restless in class, and they know they're having a hard time. So maybe you come up with a code word And you walk by and you say, pickles. And they know that's their cue. I'm not quite on track, pickles. Something to get them focused. It doesn't have to be anything outrageous or crazy. But the more you need, you got them. And we talked about kids that have difficulty with, you talked about people that have difficulty with lights and sounds. There might be a case where you need headphones, especially some of our friends with autism have difficulty dealing with all the sensory input that they may have. So you can purchase for your club headphones. You can actually get them like at Walmart in the hunting section. These I bought on Amazon, but you can get the hunting headphones for fairly cheap, and they really do tune out sound. I will tell you, I put these on in the classroom sometimes for myself.
They still hear you?
Yes,
Okay.
I can hear you talking just fine. It tends to break out all the extra sound. And you're welcome to try them and see how you like them. They're really tight too, they feel kind of cozy on your ears. And lights can be an issue. So if you have a light that's blinking, I mean, there's not a lot you can do about it now, but you can mention to the custodian or somebody that, you know, hey, that light's really having a problem with that light. It's bothering some of the kids. And for sure, move that student away from where that light is. Not only that, flashing lights can trigger seizures for some of our friends that have epilepsy.
And it's good to keep, know who your kids are, like with the administration, we had a runner
Yes.
last year. So we always knew to have someone sit with that child.
Yes.
Because he couldn't just walk around, he would run and leave the building, you know, so
Yeah.
it's good to know who your kids are.
That's totally important. Yes, safety. Safety's number one. If you have a child that has a propensity to run, you have to make sure you have a plan. And if you're in a cafeteria, that's really hard
Yeah.
because you have lots of exits in the cafeteria. I have runners in my job, and so what we have to do as teachers is kind of set up a perimeter. And so like if I'm leading and I see that kid kind of getting antsy, then I'm pointing to my teacher or I'm calling my teacher's name just so that she can get close. Or I have somebody standing between the kids and that closest exit all the time. So I could be standing there and still helping with the kids all the time, blocking that exit. And if I move away, then I'm like, hey, maybe you come over here and stand right here for just a minute so you can block that exit. But yeah, that's very true, yes.
We had a large group that we split
Uh-huh,
in the middle of the, the most that we were teaching.
uh-huh,
And we only split them a table away.
there you go.
And they kept interacting with each table, so we had to move a group all the way to the other side
Farther away.
of the room.
Mhm.
So we were able to actually disengage.
Yes, yes, space is your friend. Yes, sometimes you have to do that. And you'll find that there are kids that feed off of each other. And that's just life, you know? And sometimes you might have to separate, but then you don't want to overly separate either. If you have a group of fifth grade boys, I mean, what are you gonna do? Pull that one fifth grade boy out and put him with a younger group? I mean, that's a little difficult. That's somewhere where you need to find some other solutions probably to help with that child. Giving him a job, that's the best idea for that for him.
Are groups ever separated between girls and boys?
Yes,
Always, always.
a lot of times. We'll have a group of like fifth grade boys, fifth grade girls, depending on the year. Maybe it's a fourth and fifth grade boy group, a fourth and fifth grade girl group. Usually our younger kids, we don't usually separate them as much.
Yeah.
But like fourth and fifth grade, it's not a bad idea. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good way. Good way to do it. Let's see. Always praise the good. A lot of our kids hear nothing but bad, you know, whether it's hopefully not at school, but like if they're getting in trouble at school, if they're getting in trouble at club, they're probably getting in trouble at home too. We want to be that voice of good. And I'm not meaning to praise something that's not right. But if you see them doing something good, point it out. That's what we want them to be doing, right? If you see that they helped a friend, oh, that was such a good job. Thank you for helping that friend. Don't ever be not genuine though. Like don't make up stuff to be grateful for or to thank them for. Make sure it's real because those are the things we want them to keep doing. And if a child feels like, hey, that didn't take much effort, she really liked that I did that. they're going to do it again. And so hopefully we can build that repertoire of good behaviors within our club. Let's see, play to their strengths. We talked about that. If you have a kid that, or in our last session, they were talking about learning strategies. If you have a kid that's very artsy and loud, they said that theirs helps with worship. They bring them up front and she's the worship leader. That really wiggly kid that won't sit still, let him get up there and do the motions. Because I know after I teach all day and I get up there and do the motions, I'm a little tired. And I may be not as excited as they would be. So bring them up there, let them get you going. They have way more energy than we do. So involve them in all of that. Passing out papers. And another thing, like when you come to club, a lot of times we have papers to hand out, or maybe we're not quite prepped yet. We need to cut, staple, fold, do all those things. Find a kid and find that wiggly kid. Find that kid that needs something to do and give them a job to do. And they love to help. Like if they feel like they're doing something for you, they're going to want to do more of that. So you can just come and say, I'm running so late and I have to get these papers ready. Can you please help me fold? And yes, let them fold. And again, fair versus equal. Not everybody's going to get a chance to fold papers. Not everybody's going to get a chance to move the slides on the computer. You can give them turns, yes, absolutely. I mean, you don't want anybody to feel left out. But know what you're doing for that one student that really needs support. It's okay. It's okay to give them that job and let them have responsibility for that. Okay. And then the last thing I wrote here, I feel like I'm flying through y'all. So the last thing I wrote here is be Jesus. Be Jesus to these kids. Love them. The most important thing they're going to get out of Good News Club is knowing that Jesus loves them and that you love them. If they don't think you love them, why are they going to want to come? They're not going to want to come. So let them know you love them, even if they can't leave and know the Bible verse. Send them home with the Bible verse. It's going home. You're planting a seed. But don't plant a seed with anger. It's not going to come back to you. And you will get frustrated. There are kids that are going to make you frustrated. But you really have to take time, pray about that kid before you go into club. If you know you're going to have a hard time with that kid, that student, tag out with another leader in your class. Do something, but show them Jesus and love them. That is the most important thing. I think that I get passionate about this because a lot of our students, especially our students with autism and severe disabilities, we have kids that have behavioral disorders too, and you'll probably see some of that, where they're not going to do anything you say. Yeah, if you phrase it the wrong way, they're not going to do it. So you kind of have to almost make it part of their plan sometimes. Think about that too. When you have a kid that's going to say, no, I don't want to do that. Why? Gotta be sneaky sometimes. Think outside the box. Can you help this little friend? Maybe have them help a smaller kid do something, or having them help you is a good way to get them to do something that you would normally ask them to do, and they don't want to do it on their own. But we have to give them a way in. A way in. Let them see. And I know as you go back to your churches, I want you to think about that too, not just in Good News Club. Think about your church and think about the families you're supporting in your churches. The families that have children with these disabilities. There are children that can't come to your club. You know, there are children that can't function to sit in your club. They don't need Jesus any less. Their families don't need Jesus any less. So as you go back to your churches, think about that when you're sitting Sunday morning looking out over the congregation, you see those wiggly kids. You know, have some compassion for those families. And then I want you to think about those families that can't be there because they don't have anywhere for their kid to be during Sunday morning worship or Wednesday night services. So all these things hopefully can open your minds a little bit and give you a little bit more grace and give you some ideas on how to handle things in club, but also open your mind as you're meeting the needs of your community and your church too. Anybody have anything they want to share that has worked in their club with a
I
student?
have some questions.
Yes.
On the fidget, we had the little girl, and the mother said she needed, and she brought her little thing. And then the next club, the little girl next to her had her fidget. And
Uh-huh.
before I know it, I had 5 fidgeters. How would you explain that Mary needs this and you don't, or?
It depends if the fidget's getting in the way of the other children. Is it bothering them? Is it interfering with them being able to access? If not, then I would probably just let it go.
Just let them all do
Mhm.
their thing?
And that probably makes that other little girl feel a little bit more normal and more part of the group, as long as it's not interfering. But yes, we've had kids that have had to have special circumstances, and maybe when that child's not there, then I have a conversation with the group and say, you know, this is a little bit different, but Mary needs to have this with her. Don't think any more, don't think any less. This is just what she needs. And talk to them about things they may need that other people don't need. Yes.
So this is a little bit related. I oversee the 5th graders, but behind me are the 3rd graders, and one of them is autistic.
Uh-huh.
So I brought in for him, I brought in a koosh ball.
Yep.
The koosh ball is wonderful, so he played with the koosh ball.
Mm-hmm.
But my 5th graders, they're real talkers,
Uh-huh.
so I let them play with the koosh ball too until they talk, and then I take it back. So they got the hang of that. But now I think, I just was looking, I think I need to order some more for this coming, because they really love playing with these. Now,
You can order really small ones too.
yeah, I think I'm gonna need to do that. Mine was a big one. Now,
But they can tuck in their pocket if they're getting too busy with it. If you're not handling it right, it needs to go in your
yeah,
pocket.
yeah. Now, the neat thing is the 3rd grader, he and his sister and his family have started attending our church.
That's amazing.
And this last week, we had about 8 or 9 of the family. It's an extended family and a lot of issues, but we're blessed to have them at our church to be able to minister to them.
That's amazing.
So that's cool.
That's wonderful. Yes, ma'am.
Is it acceptable to ask a child what would help you to?
Mm.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Or talk to the teacher or administrator.
I would talk,
And
depending
see-
on the age, I would go
Yeah,
ahead and
yeah.
have that conversation with the child and say, I've noticed that this is what I'm seeing, and is there anything I can help you to let,
Help you be able
yes,
to concentrate better?
yes.
Or
Mhm,
pay
mhm.
attention better?
And I will tell you that a lot of times you'll have kids sitting in your clubs and coming to church and all programs, and you're not going to know that they have a disability. And parents struggle with wanting their children to fit in. So, and a lot of parents want to just give them that shot to be typical. And they want them to be able to come in and manage their behaviors and be okay. So, you know, don't always expect that you're going to have the news that you've got a child coming. Hopefully a teacher there will kind of share with you some information that will help, and that was leading to your point. You can ask the teacher if there's something they do in the classroom to support the child, to do that, yes. And then if you're really struggling, talk to the parent. Have your leader talk to the parent and say, you know, don't be, I mean, be appropriate and say, I've just noticed that we're struggling a little bit in this area. Is there anything that works for them at home, anything that they're doing at school that might be able to help them listen and learn in our environment? Yeah.
Are those earphones, anything special, or are they just basic?
These I bought on
I mean,
Amazon.
you said they tune out some sound but not all, or
Yes.
something? Are there degrees of?
There are, if you buy some like for hunting, for shooting, then they're gonna do what you need to do. And they're the ones you can find easiest, like at a sporting goods store or Walmart even. But you're welcome to try these on.
Well, that's all.
Yeah. They're great, I love them, yes.
All of your things reminded me of a friend who posted something last night, and she was talking about that a lot of times what we think is behavior problems
Mhm.
are really relationship problems. And that if you think about a close relationship you might have maybe with your spouse, and maybe your spouse says something rude, and you say, if you do that again, I'm going to take your phone away.
Mhm.
Would that work? No,
Mhm.
because you have this relationship. And so she says, that's exactly how we often react to our kids. Instead of responding with compassion and love with the goal of restoring and righting the relationship, we threaten and dominate and destroy the relationship. So a lot of these things is really, you're getting to know these kids,
Mhm.
and that's building relationship. It's not just reacting to what they're doing. So I just thought that was a good way
Absolutely.
to think about it, that think about maybe how you would do it if it was an adult and not a kid.
Mhm.
And you might do it differently, so.
And I think a lot of times as the adult, we think we're in control.
Yeah.
That's why we're not.
We're not, and we can't always be, and you can't look at these situations as a power struggle. Somebody's gonna lose if you look at it that way. I'd rather it be me than this kid that hasn't heard about Jesus, you know? I'd rather take a step back and try to figure it out and revamp my whole plan than turn off this kid and make him feel like he doesn't belong there. We want our kids to feel like they belong. Yes, ma'am.
Sometimes when somebody's talking to another person,
Mm-hmm.
this happens a lot, and you just say, did you have something to share with the group?
Mm-hmm.
Because it either shuts them up or they might share,
Right?
you know?
And you love it if they're gonna share.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times they do have these little conversations going on. And they're talking about deep stuff sometimes. If you get up behind some of those kids, sometimes you're like, wow. And then you realize there's some questions you really need to address usually, because they have deep questions about real issues. And as we were listening to the minister talk about, you know, all the tragedies and traumas our kids have gone through. Not only are we concerned about, we talked about learning styles here this morning, in another group we're talking about disabilities. Trauma is huge in our population, in our schools. It is overwhelming to me to hear the stories of some of the things our children have gone through. So flexibility and grace as much as you can, as much as you
At
can.
at what point, the child, you probably acting out to get attention and having problems at home, but it is constant
Disruption to the whole group.
that you think of the other children. And you have them sit in the back with a leader. But this singles him out, he's now got attention.
Mhm.
That's always been my, concern now. Then there's the motivation of, have a leader sit over and she watches and writes down the names of 4 that are behaving, and they get to come up and pick a marble and they get a treat, and then the next club, 4 more, or whatever. Will he ever get to have a chance? You know,
Right.
if you could catch him at being good, but it's just a constant working with him.
I find that a lot of kids that you have a hard time finding that good, you have to set up a situation for them to earn that good.
Yeah,
So you're gonna have to find a situation where there's no way they can mess it up.
okay.
So, hey, can you come tap this screen as soon as I point to you? They do it, oh my goodness, great job, you saved the day. You know, anything little, it's gonna have to be little. They're not gonna rise to the behavior of your typical students in one club or even maybe a year of clubs. But if you can get them millimeters closer every time, if each club you can find one thing to praise them for, yes, do it.
It was, we had, before I'd done much studying, parent really wanted their son, 5th grader, in Good News Club. We had tried and we did everything we could possibly do. I had limited leaders, I set a leader with him, but he kept hollering out. And the kids, and I finally had to tell her it wasn't going to work. I mean, I didn't know what else. Is there ever a time when it's just for the sake of the other children, you've done all?
I think there's a time when there's a safety issue. We talked about the runner. I think you always have to be aware of those safety concerns. And maybe a parent is willing to come sit with that child for a little bit.
Or it's awesome to have enough helpers that you can have.
Right.
You know.
And maybe talk to that teacher too before you go that far and say, is there any way anybody could come help me sit with this child, or help show me for a club or two, you know, what might work. And the calling out, one thing that might work too is having a signal that he wants to call out. So even a paddleboard or a stick or something that he holds up. Sometimes having that visual, concrete thing that he has to hold up before he hollers out gives you a second to realize what he's going to do. And then as soon as he holds it up, good job holding that stick up and not yelling out first. I understand
I
it.
kind of realized he was, everything he was doing was all to himself. He wasn't really part of the club and, you know, so.
Sounds like some of my friends, yes, very much so. And some of our friends with autism too may often be off to themselves and may not have the skills to really interact appropriately with their peers. And sometimes that impulsivity you'll see where I can't stop myself from hollering out. And if you can give them just something to break that cycle a little bit and reinforce them for raising up. And then you're gonna have to call on him as soon as he raises that paddle up, but hopefully that'll get a little bit fewer and farther between. So,
You're
yes.
out of time.
Out
You're out of time.
Okay,
But go ahead.
Go ahead.
So do you have any tips for, like, I'm thinking about autism specifically. We have a child that is not a Good News Club, but is in our, like, church ministry, but has trouble being a part of the group, like wandering around, talking the whole time, but also I know is capable of more because I've seen her do more, and it's hard to walk through that, where I know a lot of times it's just, I know what I can get away with and what I can't, and it's hard to, every time she's off base during the lesson, to address it every time, because, I mean, it would be the whole lesson is just addressing that behavior. Do you have any, like, specific tips or ideas, or, like,
I mean, if she's fairly high functioning, I'm not sure.
She's not, like, very hard to, like, hold a conversation with her and some things like that, and so it's hard because, especially in church, like, I want her mom to have some space
Yes.
where she can, you know, entrust her to someone else that will care
Yes.
for her, so it's hard to
And
balance that
so
with,
she can get her needs met.
it's distracting for every other child and we're, like, not getting through lessons, and so I don't know if you had any.
I would say maybe some visual cues, so you're not always having to call out to
Yes.
her. And maybe if you find something that she can have, like in her space, that will, maybe if mom knows of something that she likes to hold, or even, you know, phones are everywhere now, that, you know, like a specific app or something that would engage her. That's another good skill, is using a timer. Like if you know you've only got 5 minutes to do the Bible verse, have a kid set the timer and watch the timer for you. Something we all need. Just teach them not to yell out as soon as the timer goes off. But yeah, but something like that might be good. Some visuals or something. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? I held you over. Sorry. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.